The relationship between the United States and Iran is one of the world's most complex and consequential. It's a story that stretches across continents and decades, marked by moments of hope, suspicion, and dramatic reversals. Few international relationships have had such a profound impact on global politics, security, and the lives of ordinary people in both countries. For decades, mistrust and conflict between these nations have shaped global security and the daily lives of millions. The tension has spilled over into proxy wars, economic sanctions, and diplomatic standoffs, affecting not just the Middle East but the entire world. Every new crisis between Washington and Tehran sends ripples through oil markets, international alliances, and even the hopes of families separated by politics. Their story isn't simple. It's a tangled web of shifting alliances, deep grievances, and missed chances for peace. Each side has its own narrative, shaped by history, ideology, and national pride. The result is a relationship defined as much by what could have been as by what actually happened. Once, America was seen by many Iranians as a beacon of democracy, a distant friend with no history of meddling. In the years after World War II, American culture and technology were admired in Iran, and there was genuine curiosity and optimism about what this partnership could bring. But after World War II, a series of pivotal events shattered that image and set the two countries on a collision course. The 1953 coup, supported by the US, left deep scars and a legacy of distrust that would only grow in the decades to come. What began as a hopeful friendship soon turned into a bitter rivalry. Understanding this history is key to making sense of today's headlines and the fierce standoff we see now. Every negotiation, every confrontation is shaped by memories of past betrayals and missed opportunities for reconciliation. The path from friendship to rivalry was long, paved with decisions that echo in every negotiation and military maneuver. To truly understand the present, we must look back at the choices, ambitions, and misunderstandings that brought us here, and consider what the future might hold for these two nations, and for the world. In the early 1950s, Iran's charismatic Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh made a bold move that would change the course of his nation's history. He nationalized Iran's oil industry, seizing control from the powerful British-owned Anglo-Iranian oil company. This act was not just about economics, it was a declaration of independence, a stand against decades of foreign exploitation and interference. Across Iran, people poured into the streets, celebrating what they saw as the first real step toward true sovereignty. For many Iranians, Mossadegh became a symbol of hope, a leader who dared to challenge the old order and promise a brighter, more independent future. But Britain, facing the loss of its most lucrative overseas asset, was determined to regain control. British officials lobbied furiously, imposing harsh economic sanctions and blockades, but when these failed, they turned to a new ally, the United States. In a secret partnership, the CIA and MI6 orchestrated Operation Ajax, a covert coup that would topple Mossadegh in 1953. Tanks rolled through Tehran, protesters were arrested, and the dream of democracy was crushed almost overnight. For the United States, this was hailed as a victory in the Cold War, a successful effort to keep Iran from falling into Soviet hands. American and British leaders congratulated themselves on restoring order, but for Iranians it was a devastating betrayal. Their hopes for democracy and self-determination were shattered by foreign intervention, leaving deep wounds and a sense of humiliation that would not heal easily. The Shah, now restored to power with American backing, became a close ally of the West. Yet beneath the surface, resentment and anger simmered, as many Iranians saw him as a puppet of foreign interests. The seeds of mistrust planted by the coup grew over the years, fueling protests, anti-American sentiment, and a growing sense of injustice that would eventually explode into revolution. The United States, once admired by many Iranians, was now seen as just another imperial power, willing to crush democracy to protect its own interests. The memory of 1953 became a rallying cry for those who would later rise up to overthrow the Shah, echoing through the streets during the 1979 revolution. The shadow of that betrayal would linger for generations, ensuring that every future encounter between Iran and the West would be shaped by suspicion, anger, and the unhealed wounds of a friendship betrayed. For over 2 decades, the Shah ruled Iran with US support, modernizing the country but crushing dissent. His secret police, SAVAK, silenced opposition, while many Iranians felt alienated by his pro-Western policies. Ayatollah Khomeini, exiled but undeterred, inspired millions with his message against the Shah and American influence. By 1979, mass protests forced the Shah to flee. Khomeini returned, abolishing the monarchy and founding the Islamic Republic. The revolution upended the Middle East and ended the US-Iran alliance. Iran's new leaders saw America as the architect of their suffering, remembering the coup and decades of support for the Shah. This revolutionary fervor set the stage for a dramatic confrontation that would sever all remaining ties. In November 1979, anger exploded as Iranian students stormed the US embassy, taking 52 Americans hostage. The crisis, fueled by fears of another US-backed coup, became a defining moment, broadcast nightly, searing itself into American memory. The Carter administration's sanctions and failed rescue attempt deepened the humiliation. After 444 days, the hostages were released, but the damage was done. Diplomatic ties were severed, and animosity became institutionalized. The US labeled Iran a state sponsor of terror while supporting Iraq during the brutal Iran-Iraq War. For Iran, US support for Saddam Hussein confirmed their worst fears. The hostage crisis wasn't just a dispute, it cemented 4 decades of conflict and suspicion. Normal relations vanished, replaced by a cycle of hostility. The legacy of 1979 still shapes every encounter between the two nations. In the 2000s, Iran's secret nuclear program became the flashpoint in US-Iran tensions. Iran insisted its program was peaceful, but the US and allies feared it was a path to a bomb. Years of sanctions and failed negotiations followed, with both sides refusing to back down. In 2015, the JCPOA nuclear deal imposed strict limits and inspections on Iran's program in exchange for sanctions relief. The deal was hailed as a diplomatic breakthrough, but critics called it too weak. In 2018, President Trump withdrew the US from the deal, reimposing harsh sanctions and reigniting confrontation. Iran responded by exceeding nuclear limits, bringing the two countries closer to conflict. The nuclear issue remains the central, unresolved dispute. Each side's mistrust only deepened, making compromise ever more elusive. The US maximum pressure campaign devastated Iran's economy, targeting oil, banking and trade. Sanctions crippled Iran's ability to export oil and access global markets, causing the currency to collapse and prices to soar. Ordinary Iranians bore the brunt. Medicine and basic goods became scarce and unaffordable. The sanctions weakened moderates and empowered hardliners, fueling unrest and protests. Instead of forcing new negotiations, the pressure pushed Iran to accelerate its nuclear program and act more aggressively in the region. The policy failed to achieve its goals, only deepening animosity and hardship. For millions of Iranians, daily life became a struggle for survival. The two nations edged ever closer to direct conflict. In June 2025, tensions erupted as the US launched airstrikes on Iranian nuclear and military sites. Iran retaliated with missile attacks on a US base in Qatar, but advance warning allowed defenses to intercept the barrage. No casualties, but the world held its breath. Behind the scenes, Iran signaled it wanted to avoid all-out war, even as it demonstrated its ability to strike back. Israel launched its own strikes inside Tehran, escalating the crisis further. Yet both sides seemed to pull back, leaving a narrow path for diplomacy. Indirect talks, mediated by Oman, continued even as missiles flew. The message: both nations could inflict pain, but neither wanted total war. The world watched, anxious to see if cooler heads would prevail. The region teetered on the edge of catastrophe. The June 2025 escalation drew global condemnation and exposed deep divisions. Russia and China denounced US strikes, pushing for a UN ceasefire, while Gulf states condemned Iran's missile attack. Airspace closures and flight cancellations underscored the region's vulnerability. Oil prices spiked, then plunged, showing how fragile global markets are to Middle East instability. In the US, the strikes divided politicians and the public. Most Americans saw Iran as a threat, but opposed military intervention. Bipartisan support emerged for renewed negotiations, even as security agencies braced for possible reprisals. The crisis was a stark reminder: a US-Iran war would have global consequences. The world's eyes remained fixed on the region, hoping for de-escalation. The events of June 2025 brought the US and Iran closer to war than ever before. Tensions escalated rapidly, with both nations mobilizing forces and the world watching anxiously as the threat of open conflict loomed. The Persian Gulf became a flashpoint, and every move was scrutinized by the international community, fearful of the consequences a war could unleash. Decades of pressure and retaliation have only deepened mistrust and instability. Each new crisis has left scars, fueling anger and suspicion on both sides. The cycle of confrontation has become almost routine, making it harder for leaders and citizens alike to imagine a different path forward. History shows that sanctions and military threats haven't brought security, only more danger. Economic hardship and violence have devastated ordinary people, while hardliners on both sides have used fear to justify further escalation. The human cost of these policies is often overlooked, but it is real and lasting. Both sides must recognize that their current strategies have failed. Continuing down the same road will only lead to more suffering and instability, not the security or respect either nation seeks. Real progress requires direct, sustained diplomacy and a willingness to address core concerns. Nuclear guarantees for the US, sanctions relief, and sovereignty for Iran. Only by acknowledging each other's legitimate fears and aspirations can a foundation for peace be built. Trust will be hard to rebuild, but it's essential for peace. It will take time, patience, and courage from leaders and citizens alike. Small steps like open dialogue, cultural exchanges, and humanitarian cooperation can begin to bridge the divide. The stakes are global. Energy security, regional stability, and the future of millions hang in the balance. A single miscalculation could disrupt economies, displace families, and ignite wider conflict, affecting not just the region but the entire world. The younger generations deserve a future free from the shadow of war. They dream of opportunity, connection, and hope, of a world where dialogue replaces hostility, and where their lives are not defined by the mistakes of the past. The past is a heavy burden, but it doesn't have to dictate the future. History can be a guide, not a prison, if both nations are willing to learn from it and choose a new direction. By choosing diplomacy over conflict, the US and Iran can still write a new chapter, one defined by peace, not animosity. The path is difficult, but the rewards, a safer, more prosperous future for all, are worth every effort.